Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brownstone. I'm your host, Dr. Michele, and you're listening to Numbers Don't Lie, where you learn to get out of your feelings so you can make the best decisions for yourself, your family, and your business. So, guys, I'm super excited about today because I've had the pleasure of connecting with really fantastic women that are doing great things in their respective fields. And the first person of this month that I want to introduce everyone to is Dwana Franklin Davis. She is doing fantastic work. She's a CEO of Reboot Representation, and she is really helping to fill that gap. Her and her organization helping to fill that gap of putting women in the tech field. Because if you're anything like me, if you're in the data or the tech world, you end up being the only one a lot of times. And it's cool because you learn to get used to it, but it would be nice to be able to have someone that looks like you in those rooms to know that you're at those tables, that your thoughts and your who you are is being taken into consideration when decisions are being made. And I just made a post about an article that came out recently that was literally talking about this exact thing. Diversity is really sexy when people say it, but when it's time to actually do it, it doesn't always reflect and the numbers don't always line up. And so it's one thing for corporations and organizations to talk about diversity, but it's another thing to actually do something about it. And what Dwana and Reboot Representation are doing is helping them put action behind their words. So without further ado, please welcome to the Brownstone family, Dwana Franklin Davis. Hey, Dwana.
Hey,
How are
hey,
you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. I love to educate my community. They know me as a data scientist, but I don't think they always know what I do and the people that I work with or like to serve. And so I'm really trying to help educate people on the importance of my work, but how I'm able to help other organizations further their vision. Because it's just not about me, but I really love coming along the route with other organizations that have a larger vision to say, like, man, I played a part in that. Like, I helped them do whatever. So I'm just excited to have met you not too long ago and that you're here to share with my audience.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Mhm. So could you tell us a little more about yourself and like your passion for this field?
Absolutely. I like to say that I am a technologist masquerading as a philanthropist. So my passion is tech. I was born into tech, and my story is unique. There are a few that have a similar story, but I had early exposure and access to, I'll just say, the technology field or things that were in tech. And the words that we use today are not the words that were familiar to me when I was growing up, right? And so my parents were in what we now call the tech industry. And when I was a baby, essentially, and then a toddler, my dad worked for Atari. And then we were out in California and the ground moved one too many times. We moved back to the Midwest, but then he worked for Bally Electronics, and my mom got a job at a giant tech company. And that was my world. My parents both touched or influenced or worked around tech in some kind of way. And so what that meant for me was the exciting thing in my early years where we had an Atari game simulator. And imagine second grade year old me pulling out these giant motherboards, cleaning them, putting them over to the side, putting a new one in. And that's how we changed the games to the game
Wow.
simulator. And that was normal. Like
Mhm.
every kid does that, right? Yeah, and that it was normal to me. And so I just thought that when you have this exposure, that that's what you gain interest in, right? Insert thing here for anybody. When you have that exposure, you learn the things that you like and that you don't like.
Mhm.
And I had lots of exposure to things that were in the tech space. So starting with gaming, my dad was really passionate about his stereo system, so I knew how to, help him set it up and connect all the wires. And what I didn't know and what I learned earlier when I got to sixth grade and we were doing circuits and physics, I was like, oh, this is just like setting up the stereo. This is easy. And
Wow.
so again, it was just like access, exposure. And so I'm going to fast forward, but I've been, as you said, often the only one of few or the only along my entire journey. Went to my 4-year institution, majored in computer science, changed my major junior year, not because I couldn't do it, because I had already had 2 internships by the time I changed my major, but it was lonely and there was lack of community. And I looked around my classroom and I was like, ooh, I don't want this to be my future. And changed my major to business. And I'm thankful that my change in major did not lead me to a career outside of technology. And I had a long, amazing, fruitful journey through tech. But what has always been important to me, in addition to me being the best that I could be in the roles that I had, were helping others. And so I was always trying to build more space for more women, or more people of color and more people of color, both. And I did that in a variety of different ways, from being a founding member of the business resource group for Blacks at one of my companies, and we launched that back in 2008.
Wow.
From being part of there's an organization called Black Data Processing Associates, BDPA. I was St. Louis chapter president for 2 years. So just how do I help? How do I influence? And so my role at Reboot really marries my passion for technology and creating pathways for diverse people into tech.
I love that because it could be so easy for us to get in our own world and we're comfortable and we're just concerned about ourselves. And I mean, it's nothing wrong with that. But I love how in all of that you were concerned about other people. Like no, I had exposure, I had opportunities, or my journey still led me here. I want to make it easy for other people, and I absolutely love that you have that passion to blaze the trail for other women that want to get in tech because tech is getting sexy now. It's like a sexy
Yeah,
word,
it's
AI is hot.
yeah, it's hot.
So it's like it's becoming more of a popular field. And so I love that you're being a resource to women and people of color to be able to integrate into that field because that's something that we share in common. Like I'm in the data world, which cross pollinates with tech all the time, and really wanting them to get into this world because it's just like, man, once you in there, you in there, and you can get you a nice paying job.
Right. And I think that so many people don't realize that. And that's one of the things I love to communicate, right? And so we are excited when our young people go to college. And obviously we want them to pick a major that they're passionate about. But if they haven't had that access, exposure, opportunity to math and other STEM experiences as they were coming along, then that's not something that they're going to choose when they go to college. And the STEM degrees are the 4 categories highest paid majors out of undergrad. So we don't do enough to steer underrepresented communities into those higher paying fields through access and exposure. It could be something as simple. I like to use my own children as examples. I have 2 amazing, crazy little people that I adore so much. My daughter just turned 9. My son is 7. They are both taking coding classes outside of school. And my daughter, both of my kids like it, but my daughter loves it more than my son. And it's hilarious because my son is like, Mom, coding is for girls. And
Wow.
right, that that face right there, because I push so hard on my kids knowing that they can do anything, and my daughter knowing that she can do anything, and that my son got the message. He's like, I could do it, but this is for McKenna.
Wow. That is such a flip.
Because that's not what industry looks like.
Exactly.
So it's just that I have the means, and I'll call it privilege, the privilege to be able to afford to have them take these extracurriculars in this space. Whenever they're out of school and they got to be in a camp, well, you best believe they're going to be in the STEM camp, not just
Okay.
the regular camp. So whatever opportunity I have to give them that access and that exposure so that they can later tell me they don't like it, but they're going to experience it. And they haven't yet said they don't like it. So it's, I want it to be cool for them. I want it to be something that they're like, I can do this and I'm great at it.
I love that because I think that is the issue is that of course exposure, but kind of pushing that, like that nudge of like, you're, instead of assuming they're not going to like it, just like, no, like try this out. It's maybe contrary to what other kids are doing, but that early exposure is so critical. Because when you talked about before, like I've been STEM my whole life, but even in the STEM world, like
Yeah.
I didn't really know what careers were an option for me. But I was glad I went down that path because it made it easier to find out. Like I was in the right rooms. It made me, I was able to get to the right programs. It gave me more. I'm like, oh, I can do this career. I can do that. Cause I thought I could only be a teacher. And I'm like, oh,
Oh,
I like
see?
math and
And we
science.
need teachers. There's nothing against, we need more teachers.
True.
There's nothing against that. But there's also other things. And I think that just we need to discover what we like and what we don't like. And we do the
Mm-hmm.
same thing with kids in sports, right? Let's put them in soccer and basketball and whatever else. And they may or may not like it, but it's a discovery.
Yeah.
And so STEM should be the same. Let's try some coding. And coding's not for everyone. It wasn't for me, honestly. Let's try some data analytics. Let's try some AI. Let's try some other areas of natural sciences. Let's try it all.
I love it. Yeah. So parents, if you're listening, Dwana makes a great point. Like, let's try some stuff outside of sports. That's not the only thing our kids are good at. Like, them jokers are smart and they're so resourceful. So give them an opportunity. Shoot, STEM is the way to go. That's why I don't have any student loan debt, honestly. STEM is the way to go.
STEM is the way to go. If you major, I was talking to someone about, there's all these studies right now that come out about students that have gone to college, gotten 4-year degrees, and they have all this debt. And was the degree worth it? And I'm like, well, that's because they majored in stuff that doesn't make any money, or
Fair
we
point.
don't have a need for it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, if you majored in something that had a future, then this would not even be a conversation. So what are
Fair
we
point.
talking about here? Let's talk about where the future is going. And my whole point right now is making sure that Black and brown people don't get left out of the future.
Yes, exactly. And if we're always pushing our kids towards sports or towards these, so there's nothing wrong with the social sciences, but I do find a lot of my peers are in the social sciences, like the psychology, the social work, and even education. And yes, they're needed, but we don't need an overabundance in those areas. Like we're needed other places too. So I love that. That's an excellent point.
Keeping it locked to KCCR Radio,
My station.
the Brownstone Center, and don't forget, no matter where you go, there we are.
Mogul Beginnings Data Consulting helps nonprofits and small businesses strategize, optimize, and scale by unleashing the power of their data. So if you're ready for your data to be unleashed to help your business tell beautiful stories, connect today by logging on to mogulbeginnings.com. That's mogulbeginnings.com.
So, guys, if you are just tuning in, you are listening to Numbers Don't Lie with me, Dr. Michele, on KCCR to Brownstone. We are talking about tech and the future and making sure that women and people of color are not left out because, y'all, I don't know if you've heard me say this before. I'm a data scientist, and the data field is expected to grow at least 30% over the next 3 years. That's fast growth. And we know AI and all that stuff is sexy, and we want to make sure that we're included in those rooms and at those tables. So my guest today, Dwana Franklin Davis, is talking about how her organization is helping to position people of color and women in those spaces. So we're at the table. We have access to these high paying jobs that have really like sustainable careers. Like once you get up in there, you can retire there if you want to. You can go so many different places. So that's what you missed so far. You can check us out on brownstoneworldwide.com. You can listen to us on the app KCCR to Brownstone. You can check out Brownstone Living Magazine. There are tons of ways you can stay in the know what's happening with Brownstone Worldwide and commune with us. So we like to say, welcome home. Dwana, we have gotten so far off script, but I have absolutely loved this conversation because I think it's a much needed one about it. Like it turns into me, it turned into something that parents need to hear. Because it's just, I feel like a lot of times we allow our children to figure it out on their own, but I'm like, they need a little help. And my mom was very intentional. It sounds like you are too. And even though your parents, I don't know if they were intentional, but it's just like you were just in that world. So you had that great access. My mom didn't necessarily have that access. she had like she was like a secretary for a while, and then she ended up working at the post office. But once she saw that I was naturally gifted in mathematics, she made sure, like, she would ask my teacher, she would look for programs to make sure I stayed ingrained in that world. And so that's how I ended up being STEM my whole life, is because my mom was very intentional about pushing me in that direction. And so I don't think I can emphasize it enough. And Dwana can say it enough. Like, parents, please, 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 like, take an active interest in
Yes.
and not just the sexy things of like sports and entertainment. It's cool, it's fun. They can do that too, because I'm an entertaining person as well. But the academic part, and allow them to figure out if they want to do that too, because there's so many opportunities, and they're being missed right now because it's just not enough exposure.
Yeah. And our children have been robbed over the last few years from the pandemic, right? And we're still trying to figure out how to catch up, how to catch them up, how to help them be okay.
Yeah.
All the data, all the studies are showing that they're not right now on a variety of levels, whether we're talking about math and reading levels and scores, or we're talking about their mental health. And so I think it's going to take the collective of both, us as parents, which can be hard because we're working. Most of us are trying to figure out how to balance the work and the parenting. At least that's my story. And then the schools and how they need to help get the kids caught up and not just pass them along and pass them along and pass. How do we know that they're behind? How do we help catch them up? So as I think about for my children, I mean, sports are great. I mean, we need sports. They need activity. My son especially needs to bounce. He has to be active. So but I need the balance of how do I give them that outlet to be physical and run and play and experience the skills that they will learn from team sports, which are also necessary, but also giving them that, hey, do you know about these things over here?
Yeah.
What is that? What are those? There are some cultures that push their children into certain fields.
Absolutely.
Look, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be an engineer, you're going to do this. There's whole regions of countries that say that where there's sections of their country that focus on X. And there's data that shows that, and we don't do that.
No,
We're like, yay, they went to college, yay. We don't care what they majored in, yay. They made it out of high school, and a high school diploma is not enough anymore. So how do we make sure we want them to go to that next level? We want them to exceed. We want them to hit those milestones, but we also want it to be fruitful for them, right? So we want to, I think I heard you say earlier, make a decent salary, a decent income. Let's go further. Let's start to close the wage gap. Let's start to build some generational wealth.
Yep.
Let's start to change the dynamic of our communities and the places where we live and care about. And income is a huge part of that.
Absolutely. Oh, this has been so wonderful. Okay, let me ask you.
I'm way off your script. I'm sorry.
No, but it's so good. And I think the listeners are just going to find value, because when I say tell people I'm a data scientist and my show's called Numbers Don't Lie, they automatically assume it's like super deep, it's super complex. I'm like, it's not. Like,
It's not. It's actually it's fun.
It is very fun. They don't believe it, but it's very fun.
For us data nerds, is fun because data tells a real, factual, actual story. Data will tell any story you want to tell, but you need the real data to be able to get to the bottom of what you are trying to tell the story of.
Y'all see, she just told y'all what I do. Okay, she literally just told y'all what I do. I help, especially for nonprofit organizations, really helping them tell that story, because we know that's so critical especially when they're fundraising and trying to find grants and telling the community what they do to get people involved. Like, people are buying into stories, and if your story is showing that you make an impact on your community, like,
absolutely,
oh, I want to partner with that. So thank you for telling people what I do.
Okay. That's what I do too.
Okay. What has been one of the most rewarding experiences, like being the CEO of Reboot? What's been the most rewarding experiences of this nonprofit?
One of the favorite parts of my role are really connecting with the people that have had impact from our programming, right? So I love meeting students. I love being able to see that light bulb go off, or that that extra boost of encouragement that they get, for them to go on to the next step. I love the thank you notes when they're like, "Oh, Miss Dwana, I love when you said X and now I'm doing Y," or "I got the internship." I love those. I love those. And I love meeting professionals that are trying to make a impact and a change, and Reboot has given them the tools that they need to take to their company, and they're like, "This is what we do and this is how we did it." I love seeing that change. um, I do this work to make a difference, and so when we're able to see those nuggets of the work, because we don't run programs directly, we're also a funder, we're a nonprofit and a funder, but when I get those glimmers and glimpses of the people that we've touched, that gives us the joy to move forward.
I love that. That is so awesome. I feel like most teachers say that. I didn't have that experience. Like, it was horrible, Dwana. Like, I was like, I wanted those moments of like, oh, this is so rewarding. They're coming back. It was not. I didn't get that. Like, it was bad. So I'm glad. I'm glad you get that on a regular basis, because I think that's like, even though if our job isn't the sexiest job, or our job isn't the most high paying, but having that rewarding piece is like the icing on the cake. It's like, man, like what I do matters. But if you pay nicely at the same time, that's great.
That part right there. I mean, you have to, for everybody, right? I mean, we want, you should, it's not enjoyable if you're not passionate about it, right? So you have to do the things that you're passionate about, and it won't you won't have longevity in it if you don't like it or love it, right? So how do you marry your passions with the things that you're good at, and things that can provide that and provide and sustain the type of lifestyle that you want to live?
I love that. I absolutely love the conversation about generational wealth and providing the lifestyle, because I feel like so many times people feel like they have to sacrifice when they're doing something they're passionate about, that it has to be a
Mhm.
sacrifice of their lifestyle or who they want to be, or where, like, how they want their family to look. And it's like, it doesn't have to be a sacrifice to work, do something that you really want to do. Because I talked to another lady in nonprofit world, and she was literally talking about this, as far as like, well, I'm going to have to no, as a gentleman, I'm gonna have to like uh do this, maybe grind real fast so I can go into this really underpaid space and not like be poor. But it was like I had to trade off. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be a trade-off. You can have both.
You can have both, and I think it's a myth that nonprofit leaders are have to sacrifice so much. Thankfully, uh, I a little bit. I mean, I don't have my tech salary, but I'd make a decent salary. So it's not that kind of sacrifice. And a decent nonprofit, as they are working with fundraising and funders, and however that structure comes in, I think it's a myth that you are going to be the working poor as a nonprofit leader.
Wow. Well, thank you for dispelling that myth, because somebody needed to hear that, because maybe that's been their story for so long of like this struggle life. And I'm like, doesn't have to be. That doesn't have to be your reality. So you now have exposure to someone that's telling you, and also an example that does not have to be the case. So thank you for sharing that piece. You just dropping so many nuggets that I didn't expect, but they need to be said. Okay. The next question I want to ask is, what advice you have for tech startups or these corporations about the importance of representation, so it's not just an afterthought?
Absolutely. You need to start with it. Begin with that in mind. And so, to be more specific, there's data, there's a McKinsey study that talked about when organizations focus on, the specific word, I'm going to say people and human capital. Yeah, it's human capital. Those organizations are more resilient, more resistant in the long run. So let's breaking that down a little bit. What does that mean for your individual company, whether we're talking about large, small, nonprofit, startup, what have you? Um, Being able to have those diverse voices at the table, because there's already all that data that talks about diverse teams equal more ROI. We know that. So build it in. Don't just, obviously, some organizations start with their friend group, but okay, now add in those other diverse voices. Collect and disaggregate data by at least race and gender at every single point. So what does your interview process look like? What does your hiring process look like? What does your board of directors look like? What does your exit interviews look like? So how does the data show up? And collecting it and disaggregating by at least race and gender is going to be able to tell you, give you the foundation of where you stand and what you need to work on. I think that there are many other intersectional points that we should also focus on. So race and gender should be at the very minimum. So you can also do it by, if you're a larger company, career level. You can add those other intersectional points of, is that person a caregiver? Are they caring for babies, or are they caring for elders? Is that person a veteran? Is that person a single parent? Is that person LGBTQ plus? So what are those other layers of intersectionality that are going to add that amazing lens and view to whether you're talking about a project, a team, or the organization as a whole? So I'm big on data and disaggregation.
I love that. Me too. Because I see the personal firsthand experience where, you know, large companies, they may look diverse as a whole. Like if you just look at one big pie, but once you start to stratify by like level, like that C-suite, I mean, to be honest, a lot of those C-suite faces are very much male and very much white. And so it's just like a lot of times they can get away with saying, oh, we have a diverse company. But I'm like, because a lot of your entry level staff may be, you know, of different, like your entry level staff may look like the demographic of your city. But it's like once we start talking about advancement in your career, it may not reflect what you think it does. And I think sometimes it's a little bit of just not knowing because you're not looking at the data. But
no, they know.
You know,
So there's that. So what in my work and what I'm trying to make sure is companies are somewhat moving away from degrees. And I will agree that not every single role needs a 4-year degree. I agree with that. 100%. I agree with that. However, we don't need to shift and say all the women and all the Black and brown people, y'all don't need degrees, when that's not what we're telling the majority people, right? And what I don't want to see in 5 years when all these organizations are talking about how amazing their diversity numbers are is for all of the Black and brown people to be sitting in the bottom rung of the organization without a clear path for opportunity and advancement.
Yes. Oh, yes. I was just talking to someone about that today. Just been able to go from that entry level or that entry point into, if you want to be a VP or whatever the case may be, like that opportunity should be there, as opposed to knowing, because some people know when they go to organization or very quickly that there's a glass ceiling. It's just like, in order for me to move up, it can't be here. And that's so unfortunate because it's like these companies are losing great talent just because of their inability to want to diversify those higher level positions.
The opportunity for people to stay at companies for 20 plus years is like a thing of my parents' generation. I feel like our parents' generation, nobody does that anymore. But we should want to be there longer than 2 to 3 years, maybe.
I agree. Dwana, this has been such a great conversation. I love all the twists and turns it's taken, and I know the listeners have learned a lot about you, parenting and exposure and importance of all that stuff. So I know they're curious about you and your organization. Could you tell them how they can find you? What's the best way to connect with you guys?
Absolutely. So we have a website, rebootrepresentation.org. You can connect and find me on LinkedIn. So Dwana F. Davis at LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I'm trying to get better at my Instagram, but you can connect with me in any social media platform.
Awesome. And for those that have are over tech organizations or leaders of them, and you know you have a diversity issue, definitely connect with Dwana and her organization, Reboot Representation, so that way you can start to benefit, because we talked about the data. You can start to benefit from the diversity that are in those seats and those chairs and on those meetings, because you need it. Okay. And I want to thank everyone for tuning into this episode of Numbers Don't Lie. I hope you've learned so much. Remember, you can connect with us on brownstoneworldwide.com, and you can hear and see all that we have going on. You can connect with me, Dr. Michele, on Instagram at Mogul Beginnings. That's MOGUL, Mogul Beginnings, on both Facebook and Instagram. I mean, I'm on TikTok a little bit, but I'm not that great at it. I'm just going to tell my strength. I'm not that great at that. But you can connect with me there. And I'm a real person. If you comment or you shoot me DM, I will respond. You can know all the things that's going on and how I help and serve nonprofits and tech startups. So, Dwana, do you have any other last words before we let the people go?
That's it. Everybody find your passion, marry it with your strengths, add some tag to it, and we're all going to change the future together.
Awesome. Well, guys, have a fantastic rest of your day. See you guys.